These valleys haven't changed much over the centuries. The pace of life here hasn't either. But this constituency voted decisively last night, decisively to place a Conservative government on the cusp of impotency, with a working majority of just one. For the Conservatives, this was a by-election of what-ifs. Plaid and the Green Party didn't stand here to give the Liberal Democrats a free tilt at this seat. That left the Brexit Party and the Conservatives battling for Brexit votes between them and losing in a constituency that voted to leave the EU. So vindication for the Liberal Democrats and other Remain parties who stood aside to allow the Lib Dems a free run at this seat, and food for thought too for the Brexit Party and the Conservative Party. Add their vote together and they would have won this seat. The Lib Dem party leader Jo Swinson told me she thought the pact could be replicated nationally.
In most places in the country, it's going to be the Lib Dems that are the strongest party of Remain. But I recognise that's not universally the case, and so I think there may well be other arrangements like what has happened here in Brecon and Radnorshire, and which has worked.
But is there a lesson here for the Tories? The pro-Brexit parties got over 50% of the votes here. Well, not if you listen to the party chairman this morning.
The Lib Dems, with their dirty backroom deal with Plaid and the Greens and others, threw the kitchen sink at this and got a narrow win.
But we found plenty of Tories who wouldn't mind their own dirty backroom deal. This is what the president of the local Conservative Association told me last night.
I think we all want the same ideas. We still have to leave Europe. So therefore, I think it would help if there was some sort of an agreement.
And it's a popular idea with some in the Brexit Party too. This is what their candidate told me yesterday.
I think when we look to the future, there's a logic in working together if that's practical and if we can trust the Conservatives, but that's a long way off and we'll have to see what happens.
And there's plenty of people we spoke to who seem to agree.
They've got to get their heads together. Yeah, if they want democracy, that's the way to do it. It's make a pact.
So how effective are electoral pacts? Well, the answer to that is they're not necessarily. For example, if the Lib Dems had made a similar pact with Plaid and the Greens at the last election, they wouldn't have won any additional seats. In fact, it was the collapse of the Labour votes here that may well have won it for the Lib Dems. How did you vote?
I voted Lib Dem.
And how do you usually vote?
I normally vote Labour.
So was that difficult for you?
It wasn't so difficult, but it was the first time in my life I voted Lib Dem, and it's the first time I voted tactically.
A resurgent Liberal Democrats could prove tricky should Boris Johnson call an election. The swing to the Lib Dems last night in Brecon and Radnorshire was 12%. If that swing were replicated on a national level, the Lib Dems would pick up 14 Conservative seats. Some Tories, though, highlight the risk of jumping into bed with Nigel Farage.
I doubt that the Tories would be better off in terms of getting a majority by going into an alliance with the Brexit Party. They'd almost certainly lose seats in Scotland. They would probably lose seats in the home counties. And alliances are always dangerous because you don't know what the political events are going to be at any given moment, and people might be unhappy about the Tories linking with the Brexit Party.
Everywhere Boris Johnson turns, he's faced with difficult choices. But if he wants to win an election, the choice he makes about the Brexit Party could define his premiership.
James Clayton there. In a moment, we'll examine Conservative options with two leading members of the party. But first, Layla Moran, the Liberal Democrat member of Parliament for Oxford West and Abingdon, joins us here. Good evening.
Good evening.
Look, this obviously worked for the party in Brecon. Where would you yield, though? Where would you give up on if this was extended on a national basis?
So it would have to be seat by seat. And every local party, every local area would have to look at, which is the party best placed to stop Brexit, be part of this United to Remain movement, which is now growing across the country.
Who's going to volunteer for that, then?
Well,
which of your candidates are really going to say, do you know what, I'm not really...
I actually genuinely think that if there was a chance that there was another Remain party, that we would do that. And in fact, we did do that for Caroline Lucas in places like Brighton Pavilion. The Greens did it for me in 2017. That's how I got in. And it's not just about who stands, and I never said stood back. That, you know, we stood beside each other. We putting out leaflets in local elections with, you know, half yellow, half green on them. It was very much a pact in the truest sense of the word. But actually, it was a signal that it sent to the Labour Party voters to do the right thing. If they are Remain Labour Party voters, then actually the best thing that they can do is to back the Remain candidate. And in many places that will be Lib Dems, but in others it might not be.
Well, you mentioned the Labour Party. Why not do the deal with them then as well?
Because right now, Jeremy Corbyn is, you know, the boy who cried wolf over Brexit. We still don't know if they're a Remain party or not. One day they say they are, another day they change their minds. And I have a lot of young people in my seat in particular who voted for Jeremy Corbyn last time, believing that the Labour Party was a Remain party. They just don't believe them anymore. So, you know, I actually don't think that we're going to be in a place. We're looking at potentially an October election. Really, are we going to know what Labour stand before that point? I don't know.
But you'd run against someone like David Lammy, would you? Very pro-Remain. Very much
pro-Remain.
On the same page on Brexit as the Lib Dems.
And the question for people like David Lammy is, are they in the right party? You know, can he stand proud on a Labour manifesto that says that it's going to deliver Brexit? And that's a question for them. What Joe Swinson has said very emphatically is that our doors are open.
What about some of these seats where, if you did have an arrangement with Labour, you might unseat Theresa Villiers or Amber Rudd? I mean, just a majority of a few hundred in those seats.
Yeah. And again, at a local level, I don't know. And this is the thing. You can send signals at a national level from party leaders. But in the end, these decisions have to be taken by local constituency parties who decide for themselves what the best thing to do. The thing is, though, if you do pacts like that, you have to be sure that actually you stand on enough things that are in common. So again, when I had the Greens suggest that this was something that we could do, and we were talking about it, I had a hustings just for Green members where they quizzed me on everything, and then they voted as to whether or not that was something that they wanted to do. In the end, it was the local Green Party that decided. It wasn't the National Party that decided.
What you're describing sounds federal, organic, giving everyone a chance.
That's
but
exactly
what
the
it
right
doesn't
word.
sound like is a national policy.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would communicate that clearly at a national level.
I think.
What would you tell people? Well, just ask your local party. They'll tell you what the state of play is as to whether or not we're going to yield to the Greens, or indeed the Labour Party, or indeed the SNP in Scotland.
And this is where the ground game will be very important. But there were, even at the last election, you know, websites that were set up where people could type in, and we saw this in the European elections a lot, you type in your postcode and you knew who to vote for to be able to send that strong message to stop Brexit. I suspect that what we're going to start to see is the blossoming of many more of those kinds of things. There's already a movement like that now. It's called Unite to Remain, and they are already helping people make those decisions.
Sorry to interrupt. Lastly, does that trump people's democratic right to have a full selection
this
of candidates?
Is the thing. People can decide for themselves how they vote. And the idea that you create a pact and then suddenly all the voters who used to be in your column, you just give to another party. Actually, in the end, people make up their own minds. People decide for themselves what they do. Just because you create a pact doesn't mean that people are going to follow where you lead.
Thank you. Let's bring in Conservative MPs, Andrew Bridgen from Nottingham, who's a member of the Brexit-supporting ERG, and from Southampton, the former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood, who's been outspoken against no deal. Andrew Bridgen, let's start with you. I mean, do you draw from this by-election the lesson that you do need some kind of electoral agreement with the Brexit Party?
No, what we draw from this by-election is that we've just lost another MP who was supporting Boris Johnson and the Conservative government's efforts to get us out of the European Union, in a seat that voted to leave the European Union, is replaced by someone who's determined to thwart that. And what you're seeing is that opposition parties absolutely determined to go to any lengths to prevent Brexit and prevent the government from delivering the will of the British people as expressed as at the referendum. Well, what it shows to me is that if you vote for any other party than Boris Johnson leading the Conservative Party out on the 31st of October, we're not going to be leaving.
Well, so the conclusion you draw from that, surely, is that you do need some sort of electoral arrangements with the Brexit Party to prevent that happening on a national scale.
What we're seeing over the last week, Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister, is a huge swing of support behind the Conservative Party. who are determined to leave on the 31st of October. It's the only realistic way we're going to get out is through this government and this Prime Minister who's determined to get us out. And a huge swathe of support coming from former Brexit supporters, voters, and that's going to continue. But obviously, if we do end up in a situation where we're forced to have a general election, the only realistic prospect of us getting out of the European Union on the 31st of October is a Conservative government. And to get that, you're going to have to vote for it.
Even if Nigel Farage runs candidates, he's been talking about another 50 today and contesting all constituencies. I mean, that's the difference between victory and defeat, isn't it, for a Conservative government?
Well, what I told Nigel Farage many months ago was that you can either help us deliver Brexit or you can try and destroy the Conservative Party at a general election, but you can't deliver both. And it'll be up for Nigel Farage and his voters to make their mind up what they want to do.
Can I ask you, as a member of the ERG, I mean, we've heard talk from Mark Francois about 60 MPs who wouldn't back any sort of deal. Are you one of them? Well,
let's see what the EU come back with. I'm very suspicious about the withdrawal agreement, even without the awful backstop, because it's still a very, very bad deal. And if the withdrawal bill was brought into this Parliament, I'm absolutely convinced that the Remainers in Parliament, who are probably the majority still, would seek to amend it and dilute it even further, and we'll get bogged down, we won't get out.
But you sound like you're open to what the EU has got to say, that you are open to the idea of an amended deal.
Well, I want a Super Canada-style free trade agreement. That's what any reasonable person would want. If we have to leave on a managed no deal, we'll offer them GATT 24. The sad thing is that we, because of the democratic deficit in the EU, we can't guarantee that they'll do what's in the interests of their people and sign up to it.
And with a one-seat majority, you think Boris Johnson can actually deliver that, and all these fractures in your party?
I think the opposition parties who are determined to stop Brexit are going to put forward a vote of no confidence in the government as soon as we return in September, and that's going to be an absolutely crucial vote, and if we lose it, we're probably heading to a general election. Before the 31st of October? Potentially, yes. And without a deal with the Brexit Party? Well, I think that the ultra-Remainers have realised that they can't get a revoke of Article 50 bill through Parliament because they'd need a money resolution. That won't be forthcoming. They realise that they've got a Prime Minister in Boris Johnson who's determined to get us out, and the only way to stop him is to bring the government down. That by-election in Brecon basically made their job, the arithmetic, easier. Andrew Bridgen, thank you. Let's leave it there for the moment. Tobias, Ellwood, you heard what your colleague had to say there. He seems to be considering the possibility of an election this autumn quite high, before even October the 31st. Do you have the same view of it?
I don't. But let's just begin by congratulating Jane Dodds on her win in Brecon. Everybody has these takeaways from by-elections. You touched on that before. Mine are, I think, echoed in your opening. Labour didn't do as well as we expected. Brexit Party also didn't do as well. But add up the Leave numbers and they actually overshadow the Remain numbers. The key point that I think I'd agree with Andrew is that until you actually land Brexit, until we honour that referendum, then we, the Conservatives, will not win by-elections. So we need to get on and answer Brexit. Then we can have a general election. So, and these numbers to do with, let me just finish, these numbers to do with the minority government, we're in a minority government now. We actually need a general election so we can actually, that's the reset button that you press in order for us to actually get those numbers back up, so we can get some of the good legislation through that this country is calling for.
How much control do you think Boris Johnson actually has over this? I mean, if there is a no confidence vote, as Andrew Bridgen was suggesting, soon after MPs come back, you could be thrown into a general election in September or early October before Brexit has been delivered against the Brexit Party. Does that seem to you like quite a likely scenario?
I don't think it is a likely scenario at all. And I think it's actually the duty with this new Prime Minister that you can't deny has brought in a sense of energy, determination, leadership and passion to actually focus on Brexit in a way that we've not seen for 3 years. And that includes no-deal planning as well. You're right, I've been very vocal about it.
But how does he buck the arithmetic?
I'll come to that in a second. You're right about the no-deal concerns. We didn't do enough preparation for this 3 years ago. But today we're in a situation where you've got Andrew Bridgen, as you sort of teased him, he's minded to support Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson has more command over the ERG than ever Theresa May did. You've got 25 Labour MPs that want to find a solution to support a Brexit departure. They don't want Remain. And then you've got the DUP that want to come down for the ladder that they've climbed up to also support a deal because they're out of sync with the views in Northern Ireland. The mathematics are there. The mathematics are there to get something through. And I think we need to give the Prime Minister a little bit of time, a little bit of leeway to actually confirm that that's possible.
Does giving him leeway, as far as you personally are concerned, mean abandoning your opposition to a no-deal Brexit on the 31st of October if there's no agreement?
I was against no deal and continue to be against the dangers of no deal. But let's understand, we are not in full control of events here because there are other parties involved. And I was thinking about this on the way here. What is a comparison? I've served in operation environments, and you're made to write a will before you go out there. Some of us even write a letter to our mother, that you hope will never be posted. You do these things because they might happen, but you absolutely hope they won't, and they probably won't. We're in this situation
Are you
today.
now comparing the government's Brexit position to a last letter to your mother by a serving soldier?
You know, all of us knows, including the Prime Minister. Let's not, some of this calls for actually no deal being a destination. I mean, this is why I think it's laughable to think that we'd ever go into some form of coalition with the Brexit Party. I looked at their website this evening. They haven't got a single substantial policy statement other than to leave with no deal. And leaving with no deal isn't a policy direction. It's actually taking us into a very confusing status, which would have to then rush in order to get a lot of emergency measures into place. I think I'm absolutely confident, in fact, quietly confident, that we have a Prime Minister now that can work hard with the European Union, who actually also want a deal as well. The numbers are there to be had. I think we can do this.
OK, Tobias, Ellwood, Andrew Bridgen and Layla Moran, thank you all very much.